Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is my first video in a long time because I have been in the process of moving. So I finally moved. It's been a really hectic couple of months. So today's video is going to kind of be a catch-all reading update and also a TBR realistically for the rest of the year. So this TBR is broadly kind of a spooky season TBR, kind of October. But to me, spooky season really goes on longer than October. I love fall, so I've got a lot of spooky reads that I want to get through, and I won't get through them all in October. So the first part of this video is going to be that spooky season TBR and what I've read so far on it, and then after that I'll talk about a couple of books that I want to read for the remainder of the year as well. So first and foremost, what have I read so far in spooky season or in October? So the first book I read was The Mummy or Ramses the Damned by Anne Rice. I liked this book a lot actually, and a lot more than I thought I would. It's not at all what I thought it was. It's much more kind of period piece, erotic drama than it is horror or anything like that. But I really found her writing. I've read one book by Anne Rice before. I read Interview with the Vampire, but I read it when I was a lot younger, so I don't remember it very well. But I was really struck by Anne Rice's writing. Like, clearly she's a very talented writer, and specifically her character work. There were characters in this, good and bad, that I not related to, but you really understood them and kind of had a big impact, right? Like you could anticipate what they were going to do in all the right ways, and then they shocked you in all the right ways. But yeah, so parts of this were kind of a bit corny and a bit strange, but overall I really enjoyed it. The next book I read, I have some complex thoughts on, and I think I'm going to make a review for it probably right after this video, and that's Monster Hunter International by Larry Correia. I won't go into too much depth here because I will do a review for it, but I really enjoyed reading this book. But it was very much a guilty pleasure, because as much as I enjoyed it for its kind of brain candy, pulpy action kind of fun type storyline, I really had some issues with it, especially with the politics of the book. And the way the author is very clearly self-inserting himself and his own politics in the book. So I will do a review on this, but despite myself, I did really enjoy it. Then I finally read, I've been meaning to read this for years, I finally read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. This edition is a collection of I Am Legend and a few other short stories by Matheson, which I haven't read yet, but I want to. I will get to shortly. But yeah, I Am Legend was really good. Its prose was much more beautiful than I was expecting, and it was much more kind of philosophical and pondering than I was expecting, but it makes sense for the kind of story it is. It's kind of the archetypical last man on earth story. So yeah, really good. A bit slow and bleak, but I think all in all, a really good entry in the vampire subgenre. Then we have the first real miss for me for spooky season, and it saddens me because I want to love it so much, and this is Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. This is the third Discworld novel. Discworld is his 41, I think, book-long series. And you don't have to read them in order, so I've read this one now, and I previously read Mort, and just neither of them really did it for me, and I keep wanting to try because I want to love the series, but I think the humor just doesn't do it for me, and there's a kind of meandering to his writing that I really just don't connect with. A lot of the setups and the ideas sound really fun and intriguing, and when he's actually being more serious, I actually appreciate that. I really like some of Terry Pratchett's moments when he is a bit more serious and he actually makes his point, but the comedy I just don't quite connect with. And I grew up on British humor, right? Like, all my family is British, so I grew up on British humor, but it's just, there's something about this that doesn't do it for me. So there's one or two more books that I might try in this world. I might do Small Gods, and I might do Guards. But if those ones don't vibe with me, I think I'm gonna be done with Pratchett. And then these next two books are my current reads. And so the first one is Death Masks by Jim Butcher. So this is book 5 in the Dresden Files. I've been working through this series really slowly, not because I don't enjoy it, but just because they're kind of really fun, almost palate cleansers. That's the way I usually hear the series described, is like nice little palate cleansers. And I know the series builds into a much bigger thing, but this is only the 5th book. There's 17 books out so far. So I'm taking my time with it, but I am really enjoying it. This is not my favorite of the series, but it's not my least favorite either. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this one. I'm enjoying it. The Dresden File books are always fun because they're not too short, but they read really fast. So yeah, still really enjoying the series. We'll maybe start picking up speed with it in the near future. Yeah, that's Death Masks. And then my other current read is, I think, easily shaping up to be one of my top 10 favorite of the year, and that's, I've got a really fancy edition, I don't know if you can read it, Dracula by Bram Stoker. So this is, you know, one of the absolute classics of kind of Gothic literature, of horror literature, and it is arguably the progenitor of modern vampire fiction. And I'm really impressed with this book. I think I go into classics a bit hesitant, thinking that they won't really kind of vibe with me because of the tonal differences, the differences in style and sensibility. But I'm really pleasantly surprised with this. The horror is definitely working for me. The writing is beautiful. The prose is really well done, and I'm loving the structure. It's, what's it called when things are written as letters and clippings? Oh, there's a name for it and I'm forgetting what it's called. Epistolary, I think so. So it's an epistolary novel. So everything is diary entries and clippings of newspapers and letters between people. So I'm enjoying the kind of creativity of the structure, the prose, the plot, the horror. I'm really, really loving Dracula, and I'm glad that I finally picked it up. So that's all that I've read so far. These next books are still within the spooky season category. I obviously won't finish them all in October, but I will get through them in November, hopefully, as well. So these are still spooky season reads, starting with The Terror by Dan Simmons. After I read this and maybe one or two other books of his, I think I'm gonna do a video all about my journey with Dan Simmons, because I've read 2 of his books so far. I've read Hyperion, which is arguably his most famous and well-respected book, and I've read Song of Kali, which was his first novel, and I really, really disliked both of them. So I don't know why I keep coming back, but I do, because so many of his books sound so interesting to me. So this is one of his, there's this and The Abominable sound quite similar. It's kind of historical fiction injected with a kind of type of horror. So this is about, you know, one of the doomed kind of Arctic explorations, and kind of injecting a horror element, apart from the actual just horror of starvation and freezing and all that stuff. But yeah, I really want to like Dan Simmons, so I'm gonna try this. I've heard this is a really good one of his, so we'll see if it finally works for me. This next one I am really beyond excited for, and this is Blind Sight by Peter Watts. I had never heard about this book, and now I am seeing it on so many lists of best sci-fi books, best sci-fi horror books, and so that's why I'm picking it up, partially because it's kind of a sci-fi horror, so it fits in that spooky season idea for me, and also because I'd heard of the author a bit before, and I didn't know who it was, and then I realized that it's actually, his wife is also an author, and she was a teacher of mine in a creative writing course. So that just made me excited. I thought that was a cool connection, so I'm really excited for this. I don't know much about the plot other than that it's a first contact story. It's really hard sci-fi, like it's big on kind of science and theory and math. And there's also a vampire in it, so it sounds like a really kind of strange mix of things. But every review I've read and watched says that it just really works for this, so I'm really eager to get to this soon. I then finally have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I feel like this book was all over BookTube a while ago, a year or two ago, and it's an author that I'm really excited to get to. I have, I think, 3 of her books now, but this will be the first one I read. I don't know much about the story. I know it's kind of neo-Gothic, suspense and thriller and a bit of horror, set in, I think, 1930s Mexico. I don't know if there's a paranormal aspect to it or not, but I'm really excited for the kind of the vibe of it, the aesthetic, the atmosphere. And yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about this and a lot of her other books. So finally gonna start Silvia Moreno Garcia. Then we have another book that I really don't know anything about. In fact, of all the books, this is probably the one I know the least about, and that's Strange Beasts of China by Yan Ji. This, yeah, I mean, I really don't know anything about it. I mean, it says on the back, in the city of Yong'an, an amateur cryptozoologist is commissioned to uncover the stories of its fabled beasts. So it's kind of a novel about Chinese cryptids, and that just sounds really cool. I really did just see this on the shelf at a bookstore and thought it was such a cool idea. I love cryptids. I know nothing about Chinese cryptids, so I'm excited for this book. That's it. Then there is The Devourers by Indra Das. I think this is kind of a bit more of a literary horror, maybe more on the literary side than on the kind of genre horror side. But it sounds beautiful and really interesting, and it's gotten great reviews. It's, as far as I know, it's kind of werewolves, a secret kind of history of werewolves that have existed throughout kind of different Indian empires, and into kind of present day. So yeah, that's all I know about the story. It sounds really beautiful and kind of lyrical in its writing style and its prose. So I think I'll really like this. And this will mean I will have read one of all the big kind of monsters, like vampires, werewolves, mummies, and as I get to this one, Frankenstein, another kind of classic monster story. Yeah, I'm really excited for this. This is one of the absolute kind of literary classics that I haven't read yet. It's also considered arguably the first modern science fiction book. Yeah, apparently the story is really different than it's kind of made out to be in the kind of Universal monster movies. Yeah, I think I'm gonna really like this. It's early sci-fi, it's Gothic horror. Sounds perfect. Okay, and then last in this section is The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. I love these editions. I got a few of his books, in fact most of his books, in these new kind of editions, and I think they're beautiful. I've read one John Wyndham before. I've read The Chrysalids. I don't really remember it too well, but his I picked this one because it sounds like one of his best for his brand of, you know, kind of subtle, ominous horror. So yeah, I don't know much about the story. I think all the women in this village suddenly get pregnant, and when they give birth, the children are all very mysterious and kind of strange. So yeah, it sounds like that really kind of classic Wyndham, foreboding, mysterious horror. So I'm excited for that. So that was the kind of spooky season, the extended spooky season TBR. These are some of the other books, just a short pile of books that I want to read before the end of the year also that don't necessarily fit into that vibe. The first is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've read The Lord of the Rings and I've read The Hobbit. I've never read The Silmarillion. and I'm kind of getting into Tolkien again. I'm watching the Rings of Power and I'm really enjoying it. I have these beautiful editions of The Lord of the Rings that I'm excited to read. I found a really great vintage copy of The Hobbit that I'm excited to do. So I thought I'd pick this up and kind of make it a more complete reading of Tolkien and the kind of lore and history of Middle-earth. And yeah, I really like this edition. It's really kind of simple and understated, but I think it works really well. Then we have a collection of short stories. This actually kind of fits into the spooky season a little bit. This is The October Country by Ray Bradbury. I don't really know anything about the individual stories, but Ray Bradbury's really good at that kind of similar to Wyndham, but the American version of it, really good at that kind of mundane, subtle, kind of foreboding horror. So yeah, I think I'm excited for this. I've read a few books by Bradbury, but Something Wicked This Way Comes is a great kind of spooky book. It kind of bridges the gap between YA and adult, but I think that's a great book if you're looking for a kind of October-ish book. Then we have A Darkness at Sethanon by Raymond Feist. This is the final book in the first series of the Rift Force cycle, saga series, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, by Raymond Feist and some co-authors as well. So this is the end of the first series. There's Magician, Silverthorn, and Darkness at Sethanon. This has been kind of a surprise hit for me this year, this series. I've really loved Magician and Silverthorn, so I'm excited to finish this, and next year I'm really excited to start the Empire trilogy, which is Raymond Feist and Jenny Ward's co-writing. And then speaking of Tolkien earlier, I have actually, this is that vintage copy of The Hobbit. Yeah, I haven't read this since I was really young, and I think you can't really do a reread of Tolkien and not do The Hobbit. It's much more, you know, it was before the kind of YA genre, but it's much more YA or even for kids. It just seems really cozy and fun. So yeah, I think I'll really like this as a reread. Yeah. And then last but not least is The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan. So this is book 3 of The Wheel of Time. I'm going through this series quite slowly. I read the first 2 books and I really enjoyed them, but I wasn't enamored, I wasn't in love, right? So I do want to continue the series, but it's been 7 or 8 months since I read book 2. So yeah, I think I'll go through the series, but kind of when it calls to me. And with winter coming in, there's something about the series that seems really cozy, so it was starting to call to me. So I'm gonna do this. I hear pretty consistently that this book and book 4 are really where the series starts to take off and become its own thing and kind of grow into itself. So I think I'll like it. I'm really hoping the series starts to pick up for me, because you know, it's one of the classics of modern fantasy, and I'd love to be able to enjoy the whole thing. So yeah, I will get to this year, and that is my reading list for the rest of 2022. It might change a little bit. I might kind of add a book here if I have time or take one out, but that's pretty set so far. I've really enjoyed what I've read so far. Not only this kind of spooky season, but also this year. This has been a great reading year. So now that I've moved, I'm excited to do more videos and talk about the books I've read. And yeah, thanks for checking in. I'll be back soon, hopefully, with more videos. Thanks.